Hey everyone, welcome back to Chipstock Investor. We're going to be talking today about Qorvo, which fits in the integrated device manufacturer part of our semiconductor flow. You may recall that we've talked about Qorvo a couple of times in the past and been relatively critical about the company. Currently, enterprise value of around $8 billion and the last 12 months trailing revenue around $3.7 billion.
This is a smaller IDM, a company that both designs and manufactures its own chips. It's been almost 2 years since that last critical take we did on Qorvo. You can find that here on YouTube if you just search within our channel for Qorvo, QORVO. But it's time for an update. A lot has changed since then, and you might be looking at this thinking, is this a really cheap stock? Is it a turnaround story? After the IDM part of the industry has been bludgeoned pretty badly since 2023.
And some of the questions we have been getting have been centered around the end market chart. What exactly is happening in these end markets? And Qorvo could be a good indication of that as well.
Yeah, especially in automotive and industrial. And within that auto industrial, that's kind of where we generally place things like aerospace and defense markets as well. And Qorvo has a big presence in that, big supplier for a lot of US defense contractors. So they indicated that this is a market that is heating back up again with defense budgets in the US and Europe in particular on the rise.
You're going to see a number of charts from our friends over at fiscal.ai. We use them in all of our research every single day here at Chipstock Investor, and they're rolling out a brand new enterprise plan.
There are a lot of great new features in this enterprise plan. For example, the ability to click on a financial data point and get the source of that material. So if you're an investor that rightfully likes to check quarterly SEC filings and annual reports, you can find all of that directly embedded in the data on Fiscal's new enterprise platform.
You can still get 15% off even that enterprise plan with the link in our description below, or any paid plan with our link in the description, fiscal.ai/CSI. 15% off any paid plan. Check it out. You can make cool charts like us.
Let's take a look at this first chart from Fiscal here, looking at Qorvo's shareholders, especially this one in particular.
So we talked about this early this year, that activist investor Starboard Value decided to take, at this point, almost 9% stake in Qorvo. And a few months ago, Qorvo announced that they will be nominating a member of Starboard Value to their board of directors. So Qorvo, much in need of some work. They're an IDM. They've struggled to fill up their fab manufacturing capacity with customer demand. And that has really hurt profitability. Sort of a jack of all trades thing has not worked so well for small, little Qorvo.
And so we'll talk about their three primary business segments. They have high performance analog, or HPA, connectivity and their sensors group, and then advanced cellular group. And Nick broke that down on a fiscal chart for us to look at and how that's been performing over the last few years.
Yeah, so you can see here the trend has been not so great for a number of years now. Highly cyclical, and ultimately this roller coaster has ended exactly in the same station as where it began. So Advanced Cellular Group really has been quite the drag on the business. That's the mobile connectivity business. That secular growth trend came to an end. Companies like Qorvo, Skyworks Solutions, and others have not been able to just ride Apple's coattails for forever. And they've really just found it difficult filling up that capacity with new chip designs and new design wins. However, things are starting to look up in Q2 calendar year 2025. Now, Qorvo does have a fiscal year that just started, so Q2 of the calendar year is actually Q1 fiscal 2026 for them. So you can see from a year-over-year standpoint, revenue actually continued to decline. But the big takeaway here, some of Qorvo's early work has been to trim expenses and boost profitability. That's kind of what a company like Starboard Value expects when they take a stake in a business. And you can see the end results are starting to be seen already. So Q1 fiscal 2026 earnings, 27 cents. They were nil a year ago. So this is good news for Qorvo. And here's an example of some of the work that they did to clean up their operating expenses.
Yeah, this was announced in December of 2024. Qorvo decided to sell off that JFET silicon carbide technology to ON Semi. And if you remember, that was United Silicon Carbide that Qorvo purchased back in 2021. And they paid a very hefty sum for that. Nick has it highlighted there in April of 2022. They had a deficit or a cash acquisition of $389 million. What did ON Semi pay for that?
Pennies on the dollar.
Pennies on the dollar. So Qorvo felt like they needed to take the loss and start to move on from that mistake.
And so this is the primary reason why revenue is down a bit. And for the Q3 calendar year, Qorvo fiscal Q2 outlook for the September quarter, this is still essentially flat year-over-year revenue. So some of the divestitures and closures of some of their manufacturing lines accounts for this. But the big takeaway here is the profit margins are on the rise. They're expecting a 24% year-over-year increase in adjusted earnings per share. And besides just kind of cleaning up the business itself, making sure that their actual manufacturing capacity is aligned with actual customer demand, they are reporting structural growth across the business, especially in that end market that took so long to recover, auto and industrial, including a lot of defense spending increases in recent months, especially in the US and Europe. Automotive industry making a comeback. If you like the space economy and investing in that, Qorvo has a business that addresses things like low Earth orbit, LEO, satellite constellations. They have a lot of aerospace chips that are radiation hardened, so they're ready for space. So this is all good stuff for Qorvo and indicative that auto and industrial, which includes defense spending, is indeed at the start of a new growth cycle. Good news here from Qorvo. Valuation, what do we do with a company like this? This is not one for us that has been and still is not suitable as a long-term holding. But maybe you're not that type of investor. Maybe you're just looking for shorter-term ideas. Maybe you're interested in a recovery story that maybe you nibble a little bit and maybe the company rebuilds successfully. I still am of the opinion that probably some fresh management would go a long way here. You can see the valuation based on a 1 year forward estimate. Both GAAP earnings per share and free cash flow per share looks pretty cheap. So if Qorvo can indeed return to growth mode and profit margins improve, this could be a cheap stock. Maybe it's even due for a valuation re-rate. But the underpinning rationale here is more indication from some of these IDMs that we are back in growth mode.
This discussion on Qorvo is just one of many that we had last week over on one of our CSI live events. You can join those live events by becoming a Semiconductor Insider member. Check that out on our website, www.chipstockinvestor.com.